This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting from Cancun, Mexico. For more on the issue of the WikiLeaks cables and the international climate change talks, I spoke with the longtime environmental writer and activist Bill McKibben here in Cancun. He's the founder of 350.org and the winner of the 2010 Puffin Nation Prize for Creative Citizenship. He received the prize last night in New York, along with Planned Parenthood President Cecile Richards. Well, here in Cancun on Saturday night, just before he flew to New York, I asked Bill McKibben about his reaction to the diplomatic cables released by WikiLeaks showing how the U.S. manipulated last year's climate talks in Cancun.
Some of the new data coming out today makes it clear that everyone's suspicion that the U.S. was both bullying and buying countries into endorsing their do-little position on climate were even sort of worse than we'd realized, you know. The sums that people were tossing around and the demands that they were making of small nations in particular to endorse their stand were pretty gross, not because it comes as any great surprise that we toss our power around, that's what we do, but because on this issue above all else, you know, in the end, making some political agreement, enforcing our particular set of interests is such a bad idea because it's physics and chemistry that are actually driving the tune. And we can, you know, win every fight because we're powerful and wealthy and whatever, and we're still going to lose the war just as badly as everybody else. So I think it kind of undermines the bankruptcy of a lot of this COP process and the fact that we're going to need in civil society to build a movement big enough to really exert some power. I don't know whether we can do that. We haven't done it yet. The oil industry and their friends in the U.S. government are, you know, winning most of the battles, but we're going to keep trying, and this gives us kind of new impetus to do it.
And the reports that Bolivia, Venezuela, Ecuador, and other countries, the ALBA countries, are threatening to pull out of these talks if countries do not commit again to Kyoto, to mandatory caps on emissions.
Well, I mean, here's one way to look at it, sort of look at it the opposite way. The first people who threatened to kind of walk away from the talks were the Americans last week. Unless everybody else signs up for targets, we're going to walk out, okay? In certain ways, that would be the best thing that could happen. This is what, for 15 years now, the dynamic of these talks has been. The U.S. comes and says, weaken the agreement so we can get Congress to go along and do something about it. Everybody weakens the agreement, first in Kyoto and then in Copenhagen, and then Congress doesn't agree anyway. You know, you sort of, they sort of, it's like a flirtation that never goes anywhere. And it's wrecked the whole process time after time after time, and now the U.S. is doing it again. This time they're saying you don't get any climate aid unless we weaken the agreement and do what we want and, you know, so on and so forth. Well, look, I'd say if you're really counting, if you're a poor nation counting on some climate aid from the U.S., man, ask for a receipt, because I'm not convinced the new Senate and the House is going to come across with anything anyway. 4 U.S. senators on Thursday sent a letter to Secretary of State Clinton saying, don't give them any money at all for anything. Global warming is a hoax, and we don't want American money wasted on those nasty poor countries, you know? America has poisoned this process time and time again, and we really need to start standing up to that.
The fact that the House is saying the Republicans, when they take over the leadership, will get rid of the global warming, the climate change commission?
It's as if they're saying, I mean, literally, as if they're saying, we're going to stick our fingers in our ears and the problem will go away. We'll never have another hearing on it, so therefore it won't be happening. I'm afraid that's about as unlikely a proposition. I mean, more power to them. If you could make global warming disappear by simply not talking about it, it would be a hell of a good strategy. But my guess is that physics and chemistry will be remarkably unimpressed by this position, you know? I mean, Congress, the sort of delusions of grandeur within the Beltway are enormous. They think because they can change the tax code, they can change the laws of nature. But that's not possible.
Congratulations on receiving the Puffin Award and on your 50th birthday, Bill.
Well, it's this award from the Nation Institute and the Puffin Foundation is very nice, and I think it's a real tribute to the people all over the world who in the last couple of years, out of pretty much nowhere, have rallied around this sort of wonky scientific data point, 350 parts per million, and shown that we're at least going to give these guys a fight. I don't know if we're going to win. The oil industry and the coal industry are awfully strong, but we're going to give them a fight.
When you say 350 parts per million, explain.
350 is the most important number in the world. 3 years ago, our best scientists at NASA said any amount of carbon in the atmosphere greater than 350 parts per million is not compatible with the planet on which civilization developed or to which life on Earth is adapted. Okay? The trouble is, because we've burned so much coal and gas and oil already, the atmosphere here in Cancun and every place else in the world is 390 parts per million CO2. That's why the Arctic is melting. It's why Russia's on fire. It's why Pakistan's drowning. It's why we've got to work way faster than we thought we did even a few years ago. And so at 350.org, we've rallied people. You know, we held this fall this global work party with 7,400 events in 188 countries, what CNN called the most widespread day of political action in the planet's history. And we're beginning to build this movement. It's not anywhere near big enough yet. I don't know if it'll get there, but we're trying as hard as we can.
And Cancun, you're already talking about Johannesburg, South Africa, next year.
Yes.
But Cancun isn't done.
Cancun, I mean, it's like watching, I mean, this process, this UN process has been going on forever, and it's getting nowhere, and it's not going to get anywhere substantive until we have some power from the outside to push it. I
saw some young people with T-shirts that said, "You have been negotiating all my life."
Some friend of mine said, what I saw the other day, going down the street, who I hadn't seen since the last one of these, said, it's just like a family reunion aboard the Titanic, you know, and that's sort of what it feels like. We can't keep doing this until we can build some power outside of these arenas to actually push these guys, you know. This is, in the end, it's not about how well people are communicating or how great the policy papers are. It's on who has the power. And at the moment, that power rests in the hands of the fossil fuel industry and their allies in governments around the world. And until we build some independent outside movement power to push back, then we're going to get scraps from the table at the very best.
Do you see the fossil fuel industry here in Cancun?
You see their fingerprints on every single thing that happens. When, you know, Saudi Arabia stands up to say something, when the U.S. stands up to say something, it's on limitations, you know, there are limitations imposed by the fossil fuel industry. That's who's speaking. That's where the power lies.
Bill McKibben, winner of the 2010 Puffin Prize. He was speaking to us in Cancun. He's founder of 350.org.